We have an honor that Dr. Hassan Abbas, who is a professor at who's professor of international security affairs at National Defense University in Washington. Previously, he was served as distinguished Qaid-e-Azam chair professor at Columbia University and a senior advisor at Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. He holds a PhD, and he recently wrote a book, Pakistan Nuclear Bomb, a story of defiance, deterrence, and defiance. And he's here with us. Thank you very much. And we wanted to hear from him. I'm going to repeat the title again so that we know what we're talking. The role of media in promoting and sustaining democracy is highly polarized Pakistani media capable of making positive contribution.
Thank you. अगर मैं बगैर माइक के बोलूं तो आप सब आवाज आ रही है?
That is much better.
बहुत शुक्रिया. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure and great honor, and I really say it from the core of my heart. I'm also delighted that I'm here today with my wife Binesh, who was once a journalist. That was a time when I was a young police officer working with Benazir Bhutto, and she was among the first young journalists who were interviewing Benazir Bhutto. I'll leave the rest of the story, how we are together for the last 25 years. And also, I think there's only, everyone can understand Urdu, so I may jump into it. Hana, if I can, may I have your permission, part of it? If I can, I'll feel more comfortable.
Except Tabitha can't understand.
Okay, so I'll.
But it's fine. I'll
Okay, no.
She will translate.
No, that's fine.
Caption.
English is fine, absolutely. We don't want anyone to feel left out or absolutely. So I'll start with an anecdote, and then I'll tell you on what different. One thing that was not part of my bio, which intentionally was left, was that once upon a time I was a police officer. I was an ASP, served with Benazir Bhutto, served in Sawabi, Mardan, and then became an academic. So I'll tell you some stories from there, what I learned as well. But first an anecdote. When I was looking at how will I frame this, because now I stand somewhat in an academic role, when a very important topic was given to me, the role of media in strengthening democracy. And I was looking at my notes, what I teach, and I found a beautiful quote that I so often use by an American journalist, Sidney Harris, who was in Chicago, and he was asked once, what is the role of a journalist? And he was talking more about education that has to go into building a journalist. And he said very briefly but beautifully, he said the role of education for a journalist, he meant the role of education is to turn mirrors into windows. And that was so beautifully said that I say this to all the time my students, that knowledge is what allows you, for journalists also. It's not only about showing the mirror. You'll hear so often, people will say, सहाफ़ी का रोल है, किरदार है कि वो आप लोगों को शीशा दिखाएं कि क्या है. No, I think it is far more deeper than that. It is to open them up, to expose them to the world. And this reminds me, I wanted to connect it with one of my interviews with the owner of a leading Pakistani news empire. I'll say many stories. ये आप record जो कर रहे हैं, इसको अपने लिए कर रहे हैं?
हम publish भी करेंगे, अगर आप record होगा तो.
Okay, no, that's fine. I'll not name because the purpose is for educational purposes. So I have many stories to share, and I promise I'll maybe not name, but you can guess. But that's not the purpose. Individuals are not important. Ideas are. So I was talking to this few years ago to this leading media tycoon, if I can't think of any other word, and we were discussing what should Pakistani media do. That was Musharraf's last years, and he said, and I was thinking he'll say that the media's role is to really strengthen democracy and open up and expose what the world is all about today in Pakistan. And he said, no, sir, my role is that somehow I will show to my audience that there is was his words, this is the world, a cricket match or a football match or something is happening, everyone is watching, and my role is to show them that this is what is happening on the ground, but anyone can win. And I thought about it, but he was saying this, mirrors, what is happening on the ground. But I would like to start my conversation with the idea that no, it is deeper than that. And that means, yes, you can argue we want to be true professional journalists. And you are telling us that we need to be missionaries? Yes, that's what I'm saying, because I'll take a position on that. I think in different societies, under different circumstances, there are different responsibilities. And I'll come later to this theme and idea. But a little bit about myself, although I was extremely thankful for the introduction, but I wear various hats while making my humble suggestions and ideas and sharing with you. First, as a proud Pakistani, as a proud American also, but as a proud Pakistani in a sense that I started my career from Lahore, went to police service, first went to civil service, joined Benazir Bhutto as a young officer in her team in 94, 95, then joined police service, Sawabi, Mardan, then was picked up in 1998 to be among the first 5 people who joined National Accountability Bureau. So I interrogated Nawaz Sharif in Atak jail. I served for 1 year Musharraf, and then when we realized that this is something else happening, I left Pakistan, came to study for my master's degree at Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy in Boston. Then 9/11 happened. It changed me also, like many others, because I had served in the Pakistan-Afghanistan border areas or close to that. I had seen some of these things. Overnight, I became an expert on all things Afghanistan and Taliban. So I did my PhD, went to Harvard Law School, did a book called Pakistan's Drift into Extremism, Allah, the Army and America's War on Terror. The reason I'm telling you about this is I couldn't go back to Pakistan for 5 years. I knew nobody is waiting for me in police service now. Resigned, wrote another book on Taliban. So then from then on, I became an academic. So I talk to you as a former police officer, as an academic who is very dependent on your work. In 2002 and 3, just as an anecdote, when there was a huge interest in American media and very little access United States journalists had in Pakistan, especially in areas of conflict, I started writing for think tanks, from International Herald Tribune to other places, policy papers, and people would think that I'm either directly talking to people on the ground or I have extensive contacts. No, all I was doing was reading newspapers. Excellent reporting was happening in English as well as Urdu and a little bit the Pashto that I knew in local newspapers. And not that I was deceiving anyone, that I'm talking to people there. I became, in a humble way, among the leading experts on Pakistan in US because I was very well networked with Pakistani written word. It was not the age of social media and these all the news channels. So Pakistani media has been doing great job. Yes, with my little bit of context that I knew, it helped, but it was basically reporting that helped me get into my analysis. Also, a couple of anecdotes before I go to the themes, but these anecdotes and stories are all meant to give a lesson. My first work during Benazir Bhutto's time, I learned that there was somebody asked for a news story, and I was asked by a senior government official, "Oh, do you see this Farooq Laghari, the president? He's building, I don't know what he was building, in a firing range in presidency." And I, being a young officer, and we said, "Oh, he's wasting all the money." Do you know some journalists? I said, "Yes, I have many friends." So I called somebody in Muslim, I think. It was a journalist friend, I can name him now. He's in France, Saad Bajwa. I said, "Saad, Farooq Laghari is building this thing." It flashed on the front page. It became an issue. Later on, I realized I was used in that leak. Somebody in the Prime Minister's house wanted that leak. Remember those days? There were issues. What I'm saying, Pakistani media, what I remember in my days, which was only 3-4 big newspapers, there were always these journalists who had well networked. Government would leak stories. I remember when I worked with General Musharraf's National Accountability Bureau, some journalists were brought to us, senior journalists, very respected people, and we were told these are very patriotic people. So use them, talk to them, give them the stories. So there's that angle which I have seen, and now to another point, where the Pakistani journalism has matured in so many ways. It is under tremendous pressure also. And I'm not trying to just say necessarily positive things. I think so many investigative stories and so much good journalism has also enabled Pakistan to come where it is. I'm trying to link this, my narrative of how I look at media and journalism, to also to democracy, and coming to my topic. So in this age of social media and 24/7 news channel, previously we used to say, this was famously said, आज का अखबार कल पकौड़े बेचने के काम आएगा, वाले के काम आएगा, because the life of a newspaper, written paper, was 24 hours. Now it is only 1 hour maybe, because there's this constant struggle. So I understand the challenge that under which you operate, and there's all these competing forces and the media management, etc. So your job as a journalist is far more tougher. But I'm trying to now take this into this idea of knowledge overflow also. So anything that you can think about, you can Google. And I recently heard, I was talking to, I was in Iraq. Most of my work for the last few years has been on Iraq, because working, this is my fourth book on Pakistan. It had become, for being now an outsider, it has become painful also to follow Pakistan, because you're outside, you can't do much, so I thought the only way is to shift to some other region. So I became an Iraq expert. Went to Iraq so many times. Recently, I was in Iraq where a senior person said something to me about US policy. And I said, how do you know, sir? And he said, I know through an Ayatollah. I said, Ayatollah? Which Ayatollah? He said, Ayatollah Google. Which, what I'm referring to is everything that we think about is available. So how do you get to new analysis, God bless you? How can you take the knowledge analysis to a point further where basically everything is available through social media elsewhere, where you're this special art and skill to bring something new comes in. And that's where I want to take you. But first I must explain the Pakistani democracy, because that's where I'm pitching up for a case that I think you have a tremendous potential to contribute towards Pakistani democracy. So for that I have to briefly talk about what is Pakistani democracy. And just 3 points are fundamental to it. How, having traveled across the world now as an academic, I also must say now I'm an academic representing US government, because I'm National Defense University in US, where like the Pakistani NDU, we get funded, we at times represent US government, at times we are in our own academic capacity, but there are challenges. There's a national security perspective or lens that is pushed on us. When I go out and write and give an interview, yesterday I was asked on BBC to represent the view of how US is looking at Imran Khan. And when I informed the leading PR person in the Defense Department, I'm going in BBC talking about what Trump administration thinks of Imran. He said, yeah, that's fine, but just accurately reflect US position accurately. I said, so what is US position? Is there a document written that this is just an indirect way to kind of push to, okay, be careful. There's nothing in writing on US policy on Imran Khan, but I'm supposed to reflect it accurately. But because I'm in US, I could tell him, okay, I'll try. And neither he will check, nor he can dare ask me. We were watching a BBC interview, and you were saying something on critical US policy, you draw your check from Department of Defense. I dare that person. No one will check me. So I am operating in a slightly different environment where the freedom of speech I can use. But democracy in Pakistan, number one, it's a continuous struggle. When I teach about democracy in US, and I get students from all over the world, all US allies, mostly from Middle East and South Asia region and Africa. And I compare most other countries which are going through this transition to democratic ideals. I think of Pakistan as a far more mature and advanced democracy than most of any other Middle Eastern country that even tries to claim their democracy. Why? The examples I give, Jinnah was a hardcore Democrat. The country was created in the name of democracy. Look at again I'm going back, but that idealism is not totally outdated, of his cabinet being full of Ahmadis and Shias and Parsis and Hindus, and no one ever thought about it. We started off a country as Pakistan is a country where Jinnah, a well-known, accepted, I don't want to go into a sectarian lens, but he was a Isna Ashri Shia. Whether any of the Jamaat-e-Islami, Jamaat-e-Ulama-e-Islam, any of his opponents who used to call him Kafir-e-Azam, whether anyone ever made a sectarian attack on Jinnah? No. Even Jamaat-e-Ulama-e-Islam, Jamiat-e-Islam, those who wanted to kill him. So from that point, you have come to a totally different point. But started off, Pakistan as a democracy. 3 or 4 military dictators all thrown out. There is no comparable example in Africa and Middle East where a country has gone back to democratic credentials, and whenever there's a dictatorship, people push back. And that's what we have seen now. All the rumors of US support, the support from military and Pakistani intelligence for Imran Khan's party, we know that has happened to a limited extent. It has always happened. I was recently in that. I wish it was not being recorded, but we get Pakistani senior generals also in our National Defense University. So we had a very senior Pakistani intelligence officer who was recently there. And that's the point. This is honestly, I'm trusting you with my. I go to Pakistan. नहीं है वो एक अलग बहस है उस पे करेंगे मैं I am little अगर मैं पाकिस्तान में वोट डालने गया होता मैं इमरान को वोट डालता sorry I have to be open that's मेरी कल इनसे बहस हुई है we will talk about it we will talk I would love to talk about it in fact that's my we were about to travel to Dearborn Michigan my wife said कि अच्छा पाकिस्तानी जर्नलिस्ट है मैं सुनना चाहती हूँ उनका क्या ख्याल है I have to go to my old people so हमने we postponed it so coming back to it ये dynamic, it's extremely difficult in Pakistan. I know that. But democracy, there has been constant tussle. People among the journalists stood up. I was seeing Geo and others, Sama and Dunia. These were Express News. These were available free live stream. They were streamed, and I could see that in between the words. Even it was great to see Kamran Khan having a discussion with Pirzada when the election was delayed for the first 2 hours. I'm sure you were watching. And Pirzada said, who's also a friend, who said, oh, no, this can happen technical. And Kamran Khan said, come on, yaar, chodo, yaar, jaane do. Khuda ka khauf karo, yaar. What I'm saying, this is amazing. This is huge. So this defines in the Pakistani character, I would say, always pushing back against dictatorships or hanky-panky whenever it happens. And media has been taking a lead role. That's the point I'm taking. Historically. Think of Zia, no social media, nothing. I'm forgetting the full name, Mr. Zamir, who has written a book on journalism. Zamir Niazi, Journalism in Chains. Pakistani journalists have been doing a phenomenal job. So the legacy that you
journalists with flaw, Nasir Zaidi and
Nasir Zaidi, absolutely. So the legacy that you are far more today. 15 years ago, there were far more journalists. Now there are so many media channels, etc. So the legacy that you are holding behind you for Pakistani democracy's context is huge, and it's very, very powerful. Secondly, so what is in Pakistani democratic context? I've already mentioned the first factor is the struggling democracy. We have to agree. It reminds me of my professor Shafqat Saeed when I was in Civil Services Academy in Lahore. He wrote an excellent article. It's available on internet. Please Google it. He used to say, Pakistani democracy is a disconnect between democratic reality, between democratic idealism and autocratic reality. एक constant tension है इस autocratic reality में जो फौज के थ्रू, ट्राइबलिज्म के थ्रू, पेट्रियार्की के थ्रू आएगी और एक ambition, एक aspiration के we have to be democratic. This tension between autocratic reality and democratic ideal is an ongoing thing, and you are placed right at the heart of that. That's why your role is so critical.
So what is the name of the author?
शफकत सईद बड़े मशहूर प्रोफेसर हैं, बड़ी किताबें लिखी हैं, FC कॉलेज में आप वो हेड ऑफ डिपार्टमेंट हैं, शफकत सईद.
Yeah, he's my ex.
अच्छा, बहुत ज़बरदस्त, मेरे भी उस्ताद हैं. The third thing is कि मीडिया, ये मेरा उससे लिंक हो गया कि मीडिया एक पिलर के तौर पे अब सारी दुनिया में आया. और चौथी बात, religious sensitivity. Pakistan में and within Pakistani context, this idea of religiosity and this idea of national security has become very problematic. Again, I have a personal example with slightly selfish interest, but I'm explaining just to make a point. My first book, Pakistan's Drift into Extremism, and I owe that greatly to actually our dear friend here, the founder of this organization. He did a story in Dawn, Iqbal, and that led to, it became a bestseller in Pakistan and India. That made my career because I had worked closely with Musharraf. I declassified all the stuff that I could. I was too impressed by American journalist who I'm feeling bad, I'm forgetting his name, he always writes the best book on what's happening inside the White House. Bob Woodward. Said I read too much of it and I spilled the beans, that made my career, it was easy. Then I got another book, Taliban Revival, it worked great. It was reviewed widely across Pakistan. And then this book, which has recently come out, and I was talking to 3-4 friends in media and I said, यार इंडिया के हर अखबार ने रिव्यू किया है, खुदारा मैंने पाकिस्तान के लिए लिखी है, तो उसने कहा सर आप खुद भी मरेंगे और हमें भी मरवाएंगे क्योंकि आपका टॉपिक इतना सेंसिटिव है, न्यूक्लियर इशू. So this constant tension, keep in mind where is that balance. This is the nature of democracy as it stands in Pakistan. Now I go to how other democracies like US, UK and others, how they have pulled it up together, because there were very similar challenges before. Even now, there's serious challenges. I can tell you, things happen in American media in terms of manipulation also. Perception building, we know on what had happened in the Iraq campaign, and all major US media had come out, all the major newspapers, and they apologized. Two news stories that I want you to write, all the young journalists, all of you, and later on look at it, because that's where now I'm coming from, how to strengthen democracy in your country. One is this reporting by AP actually, Associated Press, which was picked up by New York Times, which was about how NYPD, New York Police Department, made inroads into mosques in larger New York area, looking at spying on people. This is a big issue. You go to any mosque. I've lived in 9 years in Boston, 5 years in New York, then this is my 7th year in DC, and this is an issue. You go to any mosque, people think, but there was this story that came out which proved it. And it had a huge impact. It changed US government policy on profiling. I mean, currently now, everything is up in arms with this new administration. But before that, there was a constant effort in this reporting by AP on how they figured out the investigative reporting part was huge. That's one way, I think, how democracy and media in US works. The other story is recently by another friend, 2 friends, but also this one because she has Pakistani roots. So I'm mentioning her, Azmat Zara and Anand Gopal. They were my colleagues at New America. I'm mentioning New America because that's only one of the few American think tanks which is now investing in young investigative journalists. And I want all of you to apply, or some of you to apply there. They go and pick bright journalists and then invest in them in writing books based on their investigative reporting. So the Azmat Zara and Anand Gopal, they got most important awards in the last 3 months for their story on Iraq and how US military campaign against ISIS. We're not talking about old counterterrorism approach, the latest anti-ISIS campaign. They said they were working on other issues, but they were actually looking at data in each case. And their story came out. Anand Gopal is now in University of Arizona, which went too deep into all the data which NSA had, which, for instance, the US government was not sharing, Department of Defense was not sharing, how many strikes had happened, how much was the collateral damage. But when they came out, the Defense Department has changed their policy, and these were not working for any major news media. They were independent journalists. They sold their story to New York Times. Another example of how at times when US government might be giving more stories to some media houses, how still there is always space for investigative reporting. Now I come to, so based on this, what I've just 2 examples that I've given, and I'll not take more than 3 more minutes, so what is democracy about? I mean, I'm asking you to strengthen democracy in Pakistan through your professionalism. So what are you exactly supposed to support? I think my definition, based on my humble knowledge and reading other great works, number 1, democracy is at the core of it a social contract between people and state. And even though we'll say constitution is the guarantor, judiciary is something which supports that, no. It is that social contract, the witness of that social contract is media. So that's one role or one concept. The second is about accountability. Democracy is about accountability. Even Plato and Aristotle, when they had talked about democracy, and even other great writers, they would always say, this is the worst of the acceptable forms of government. Why they were saying it? They knew whenever there's dominance, there's a dominant group, they will try to push back diversity, and they will, because they are majority, they will try to get their way out. So it's the idea of accountability. Again, I need not say a single word. You know what is accountability, and through your journalism, You can do that accountability. You can allow and empower the people who have to make accountable through their vote. You are that channel. The judicial process is too long. Everything else happens differently. This media cycle, this media role that you have allows that accountability to happen. And last but not the least is about what I was earlier saying about Ayatollah Google, which is the data set. Even if everything is available, going a bit deeper, investigating and getting the facts out from government agencies, that can turn around things. So my 3 points that I want to leave you with: there's always space for investigating and reporting, and that's the way to strengthen democracy. Make yourself specialized in that field. That's another thing I wanted to emphasize. In this day and age, when everyone is competing for headlines, in democracies, the investigative reporters who become specialized on nuclear issue today, and I'm mentioning this because of my recent work, you always will go for David Sanger. You know, he's the top New York Times writer on nuclear issues. He will be updated. So there's this idea of specialization. Create your specialization on the issue of agriculture or security policy, or security policy is not easier said than done, but on so many other aspects of it. And last but not the least is what I often, and now I have to close by wearing my police hat. I'm a member of a WhatsApp group by about 300 Pakistani police officers. In fact, the stories I was rather than watching television, I was looking at all the DPOs, what they are saying and happening in each district in this election. And the young police officers, and I've done a lot of work now on Pakistani police reforms, the young police officers are doing a phenomenal job in trying to change the image. They cry every day on this WhatsApp group. These are active Pakistani police officers. Media is not interested in depicting police or a good cop as a good story. They always are showing when people are hitting at police or something else. I'm using this only as an anecdote. Part of enabling, strengthening democracy is to take the good story out. And there's no dearth of good story. And I know many of you are doing it, but more needs to be done. That's all what I could contribute. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
अच्छी बात है, बहुत अच्छा सवाल है. I would say मुझे खुशी इसलिए हुई, मैं फैन इमरान का इस तरह हूँ कि मैं वोट डालता, मतलब आप लेसर इविल को भी वोट डालते हैं ना बाज़ दफ़ा, कि इसकी एक क्लैरिटी पे दाद दें आप इमरान को. मैं आइडियोलॉजिकली पीपल्स पार्टी के साथ हमेशा से उन्हीं को वोट डाला होगा. इमरान पहले दिन से कह रहा है रूल ऑफ लॉ. ये बात दुनिया में, मैं एज ए हम्बल, मैं कोर्स पढ़ाता हूँ रूल ऑफ लॉ, पुलिसिंग एंड नेशनल सिक्योरिटी. रूल ऑफ लॉ के बगैर अमेरिका में भी ये आपका ख्याल है कि जितने यहाँ पे ड्रग माफियाज हैं, बाकी लोग हैं, जितने वाइट सुप्रीमेसिस्ट्स इन अमेरिका, डू यू थिंक दैट दे आर सो नाइस टू एवरीवन एल्स, that Americans have given rights to the blacks because they wanted to be nice? No, that because of rule of law. So Imran's clarity on rule of law is one hope. So I would like him to pursue that. Secondly, it's a longer debate. I think because the kind of connection he has developed with the military, because no one else, People's Party, so clear. Nawaz Sharif learnt through hard mistakes, oh, the military will decide Afghan policy, India policy. Imran now has excellent relationship. I have listened and heard Pakistani generals and senior military officers, they love him. Maybe based on that love, they listen to somebody who's a civilian. That's the hope. I hope. Let's hope. Let's hope. So, but I would say Talibanization is it's a broader context. If you do the policing right, because I had heard from everyone, and I had been criticizing US policy whenever we were given.
ये तो चौधरी निसार ने आते ही सबसे पहले, और you remember I wrote an article about this, कि यूनाइटेड नेशन से जो पीस कोर की पुलिस की जो ट्रेनिंग के लिए आते थे लोग, they pulled them out.
चौधरी निसार pulled them.
और वो आर्मी को दे दिया उन्होंने. They are still there. हालांकि पाकिस्तान was leading in that.
You're right. You're right. That was a very important story actually. Police officers in Pakistan, they all refer to that, and they are trying to get that back. That one story, not that he's based here, and I'm saying it reminded me that one story had a huge impact on the Pakistani police officers. They have started lobbying to get it back because of that one story you did.